Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the Connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. This is Pastor Goodman, and I want to welcome you to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Today I'm talking with Mike Sluder, who is the Director of Connectional Ministries. I sort of like that concept, Connectional Ministries, Wesleyan Connection. There's a sort of a symbiosis there of sorts. They sort of go hand in hand, don't they? Well, when you hear what Mike's job description entails, you'll see that out of all the people in the annual conference, there's a good chance that he's the one that, as I say in the interview, probably has his finger on the pulse of the annual conference. Now, during the interview, we're going to talk about some things along the lines of mission insights, missions into Sudan and Ishe Anesu, talk about local missions, how we can maybe deal with children and poverty grants. But then we start talking about passion and Mike's passion for mission, and we get off into some specifics of giving away bottled water and sowing seeds. And to me, the entire conversation is great, but I really enjoyed some of the insights that Mike gave in the latter part of the interview. So I hope that you'll stick around. It's a little bit longer than normal. I decided rather than try to cut it into two 10-minute sections, I just put the whole thing out there, and hope that you would give me an indulgence and stick around for the entire broadcast. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Mike Sluder. I'm talking now with Mike Sluder. Tell us what your job title is here at the annual conference, Mike.
I'm the Director of Connectional Ministries for the annual conference.
That sounds sort of vague just in terms of titles. What does that mean you actually do?
My office oversees the programming ministries at the conference level from Chattanooga to up to Radford across the conference. And that includes older adult ministries, young adult ministries, youth, children, camping, discipleship, witness, missions. All of that falls under Connectional Ministries. Okay.
So that sounds like you can't say you don't have anything to do today, then. Is that what you're saying?
I've got one or two things on the slate for today. Yeah.
Today and tomorrow and the next day. Well, when you look at those that broad spectrum of responsibilities, what's one of the pressing ones right now for you? What's on your plate right now?
Probably, as part of this role, I'm also part of the conference strategy team, and so we're looking at how the conference is organized to be in mission and ministry across the conference. And so probably one of the more pressing things is how do we best help the churches of Holston Conference be in ministry in their community, and to know who is in their community and how to best reach them for Christ.
Sounds like mission insight maybe is something that you're pushing in terms of a way to help understand that.
We are using mission insight a good bit, and the window that it gives us to look into the community and to see who all's there. And of course, part of Mission Insight, Tom Bandy's written a whole bunch of information on the different mosaic groups and the different lifestyle segments and about what they're looking for in church, what kind of leadership they like, what kind of worship they like, what kind of music they like. And so it's got a lot of information to help us understand who we're trying to reach.
Okay, from a skeptic's viewpoint here, I'm big into demographics and those kind of things, but I always hear people say to me, well, how do you really know that those people are living around us that fall into this category X that they say is here? How accurate do you see these lifestyle segments really being in terms of church X and city Y? Are those people really there around them that those lifestyle segments say that there is?
I found it to be fairly accurate. When I was senior pastor at Bearden, I used it a good bit, and to help the church know who's right around them. And it was, now the exact numbers are going to vary somewhat, maybe from what they say is there, but those groups are going to be there. And it's based on a lot of different ways of collecting that information that Mission Insight uses. A lot of it's through financial, like Experian, and looking at what people are buying and how they're spending their money, and so there's a lot of information out there that they collect into one place, and it's a pretty accurate picture of who's out there. Like I said, the numbers that they say may vary somewhat, but those groups are going to be there.
Now, if I understand correctly, any local church can get access to a Mission Insight report for their vicinity. Is that still available?
It is. It is. Part of what your tithe as a church helps cover is the cost of Mission Insight for the whole conference. And so it's available at no charge to the church outside of the tithe that they send in to get that report. Just check with Sue Weber up in the Congregational Development Office if you don't already have an account, and set up with Mission Insight, and she can help you do that and can help you walk you through getting those reports. Looking at who's in your church and who's in the community, and then comparing those two.
I'm thinking one of the things that y'all as a conference had asked us to do was actually plot our members into Mission Insight so that we could see where our folks lived in the community neighborhood sort of scenario. I've actually got that list, but never have uploaded it yet. So maybe you have spurred me to go get that done today.
That's
Mike.
called, in Mission Insight, that's called the people plot.
The people plot, okay.
And you put that in, and then you can get a report called a comparative analysis that will compare what your church looks like to what your community looks like. And it can be eye-opening for the church to, a lot of churches, as you well know, the membership of the church may not look a whole lot like the membership of the community that church is sitting in. And it can be eye-opening for a congregation to realize that. And then as Tom Bandy would say, it helps them find a heartburst. What part of that community do they have a passion for? And you can't do everything for everybody, but there may be a segment that your congregation has a passion for, and then you can begin to make some ministry plans around that.
One of the things that I'll just use my church as an example. Our community around our church, we have fairly well defined zone by some major roads and stuff, and we figured there's like 152 houses within that zone.
Yeah.
And so we, for 3 different years, have gone and one week put a thing on the door saying next week we're going to come and collect food for the local backpack ministry at the middle school, or actually the elementary school. And we have found that the community will get involved in that kind of thing because we are doing something to make an impact on our community.
Right.
We've not done Mission Insight to see if they're hungry children, but we have teachers that say there are kids that come to school on Monday morning saying, I'm hungry.
Well, if you want the frontline information to back up what Mission Insight's telling you, talk to your teachers.
They do. I think that they see what the families of your community are going through. They understand that they're, especially in Southwest Virginia where the coal mines are shutting down,
closing,
and stuff. Poverty and hunger seem to be some issues that local churches have to deal with. Well, what else under your umbrella of responsibilities would you like to talk about with us? What would you like to share with the thousands of listeners out there to this podcast?
Missions. Holston Conference has always been huge in missions. We've always had mission outreach, and from the local level to the international level. On the international level right now, what we are dealing with is the extreme unrest in South Sudan. And we had Fred and Libby Deering are our missionaries on the ground in South Sudan who are not in South Sudan right now because of that violence and the fighting going on. And so we are discerning next steps and how to best continue to be in ministry with our brothers and sisters in South Sudan in the midst of this violence and having to do it from afar. The 2 children's homes that Holston has built and been supporting, Grace Children's Home and Greenland Children's Home, we've been able to get the total of 36 children that we've been supporting in those homes. We've been able to get them out of South Sudan and safely to a refugee camp in northern Uganda. And Fred and Libby have just gotten back from northern Uganda to try to get things set up to continue to support them there and to get their schooling back up and going there in northern Uganda. And so we're trying to do our best to work through that. And we still have our churches and our pastors in South Sudan that haven't had to flee because of the violence are still there working. The church is being in ministry and trying to work. So we're trying to figure out what's happening and when we may be able to get back into South Sudan. It's not looking promising at the moment anytime soon. But so those are some of the, on the international mission level, trying to figure out what that looks like and how that might look. We're also working in Zimbabwe with Ishe Anesu that Holston's been part of for about 15 years now with Bill and Maria Humbani. They are getting ready to retire, and they'll be moving back to Mozambique probably in about a year. So we're trying to see what that transition is going to look like for Ishe Anesu, who the new leader for that ministry may be, and because we've got about 60 children there that we've been working with that have lost either one or both parents to AIDS. And so we're working with those kids. Ishe Anesu has become their second home and trying to figure out what that's going to continue to look like as Bill and Maria move into retirement. And so we're working with the Bishop Niwatima, the bishop there in the Zimbabwe conference, because Maria is a GBGM, General Board of Global Ministries missionary, and so he has to request another one. So we're working through that process. Locally, we've been working to distribute the grants for children in poverty. The last 2 years at annual conference, the missions offering has been for children in poverty in Holston Conference, within the bounds of our own conference. And so churches throughout the conference for the last year and a half have been applying for grant monies, and we've been distributing those monies up to $5,000 per grant. Last year, we distributed, I think it was 55 grants for a total of about $188,000 that went locally to local churches to be in ministry, doing like what you were talking about with backpack ministry or food pantry ministry to reach out and to deal with some of those hunger issues that are there as a result of the poverty. And so we're continuing to do that this year. We've had our first grant round. The first deadline was August 15th, and we granted 6 grants out of that to 6 different districts, churches in 6 different districts. And the next deadline is November the 15th for churches to get that. You can go to the website under grants and find the Children in Poverty grant, and that's where you can find the application and fill that out and get that in, and we'll be making distribution of some more funds and to help churches just be in ministry next door.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you have your finger on the pulse of the annual conference and the pulse of our outreach overseas. I really appreciate the ministry that you do, and I'm thankful that we have someone that is so inclined, I guess, for lack of a better word. One of the things that I want to ask when I get somebody behind the microphone is, I think that the word passion is important. Mm-hmm. I think that we don't do the things we do just as a job. I'm not a minister. I could be doing a whole lot of other things than the minister of a local church. You could be doing something else, but I think there's a passion that defines why we do the things we do. Have you ever thought about what the passion is that drives you to do the things you do for our annual conference?
I have. Before I was in this role as Director of Connectional Ministries, I was appointed as Associate Director for Missions. Mission has been a passion of mine from early in my ministry, of not necessarily local over against international or international over against local, just a passion to help churches see that if you're offering Christ and somebody's thirsty and you don't give them a cup of water, they're never going to hear your word about Christ. But if you're offering that cup of water and it's just water, there's another thirst they've got, that thirst for that relationship with God through Christ, that they're never going to be able to quench either. And so you've got to link those two together. And that's been a passion that has driven me through my ministry, whether it's been in the local church or now I'm on the conference staff, is just to help individuals and churches see that when Jesus told us we've got to love God with all that we've got and to love our neighbor as ourselves, that for me that's lived out there on the mission field of sharing the love of Christ by meeting needs, by helping folk understand that the God that calls them into a relationship is also the God that sees their need and reaches out to meet that need. And then to help churches see that if we want to be a vibrant, vital church, then we look outside ourselves and see where God's at work in the community, and then we go join that work.
It's funny you mentioned water. Tomorrow I'm on the way to Sam's to pick up 3,000 bottles of water.
All right.
So that Saturday we can go and try to pass out water on a 70 or a 68 degree high, rainy possible day in Southwest Virginia. There's a big festival there at Mountain Empire Community College. And,
okay.
And for the last 5 years we passed out water. You know, a lot of times they'll say, "You got any hot chocolate?" No, we've got water. And we'll be glad to give you water. We're trying to quench their thirst, but I'm running into the issue, like you say. On the one hand, I can give them water to quench their thirst, but how do I quench that spiritual thirst through that bottle of water? Mm-hmm. You know, is it the conversations that we strike up when we're in the process of handing out that water? You know, that's the iffy part for me, and I think my church wonders about that too. Preacher, why are we giving away 3,000 bottles of water? And I say, well, the scriptures say I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. So how do you think a church or a ministry can make that connection past the physical bottle and into that spiritual dimension?
Like you said, I think it starts with that conversation, and with that, I think that when you're giving that bottle of water, if there's whether explicit or implicit invitation with that bottle for continued conversation, and then to look for ways to enable that continued conversation to happen. I think it's about relationship, and relationship takes time. We church folk, preachers, we want a fix that's going to happen overnight. We want to be able to give that bottle of water and then the sanctuary be full the next Sunday, with folk ready to come to the altar and to participate in the ministries of the church. Well, it's not going to happen that quick, but it does happen over time. As long as you find ways and enable ways for that conversation to continue and for that relationship to continue to build, it's just going to take time.
I'm a believer that a church needs to sort of build its reputation within the community, and it's no secret in the community that I'm serving now that my church, I've been there 5 years now, and prior to my coming, we went through a tumultuous 10-year period when our name within the community, so to speak, was not all that great.
Okay.
And so for 5 years, I have been trying to build up the reputation, so to speak, that we are a church where we're going to care for you. And now my folks are finally saying, you know, people are saying to me, some of my folks would say this to me, that we're the only church in this community that's reaching out to feed the kids at the elementary school. We're the ones that reach out and do this. We're the ones that do this. We're the ones that do that. So I think we are to the point where people know that we're a place of some action. Mm-hmm. But I'm still trying to find that spiritual connection between the things that we do, which I believe are very scriptural: feeding the hungry,
right,
giving water to the thirsty. So
have you been able to have an opportunity, or has anybody that you've served ever said, "Why? Why are you doing this?"
Well, yeah, sometimes they do when you're handing out. Why are you all here trying to hand out this water? And I'll say, well, the Scripture tells us, that we're to meet the needs by providing for those that are thirsty a bottle of water. And I hope that we can meet that need. I hope we can meet other spiritual needs as well. Not everybody says that. Out of the 3,000 bottles of water that we'll hand out that day,
right,
we may only have 10 or 15 that really want to go deeper. And
right.
I'm hoping that for those 10 or 15, that's the seed that's going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So, but convincing your folk that we need 3,000 bottles of water to get those 10 or 15 seeds planted, and not see, as you say, 3,000 people in the church the next week.
Right.
That's sometimes a hard sell for a local church. I believe what you said. We want instant results.
Yeah.
I heard I can't remember his name. I was listening to a podcast on the way down here yesterday, and it talks about the scripture where the seeds were planted, and some were 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. Mm-hmm. And he said that he had looked at that, and he was seeing it in terms of immediate results, and he was not seeing that in his life. Been in ministry for 20, 30 years. Until one day the Lord spoke to him and sort of said to him, that's what I expect in terms of your whole life. If you can have a 30-fold, if you can influence one person a year for the kingdom, if you can influence over 30 years, you've got your 30-fold. And I'm going, never quite. That's a long-term look at it.
It is. And Paul also tells us, and I'd have to go look up the exact reference, but he also reminds us that some of the seeds we sow, we may never see the fruition. Somebody else waters them. Somebody else harvests them. And so it's some of the seeds that you're sowing with those bottles of water there in the community, you may never see grow. Mm-hmm. But somebody's going to water that.
Yeah, it's ministry is such an interesting thing. And, both of us being ministers, I don't know if we just look at it differently than the lay folk do or not, but I'd like to get some lay folk and some ministers together for a conversation just to compare how each of them see ministry.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, this thing that the Lord has put us into the midst of.
It is.
And I'm so grateful that there are folks like you that are willing to work in this conference level kind of ministry and provide guidance and suggestions and I'll say solutions every now and then, but you don't guarantee solutions.
Nope. Sometimes I have a lot more questions than I do answers.
And that's good. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we bring this podcast to an end?
Just thank you for what you're doing in your local church and in the ways that you're serving on different committees as well in the conference level. And it takes us all.
Well, I want to thank you, Mike, and I'll let you get on to those meetings that I know are probably waiting ahead of you to this day.
I've got a couple.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.